What if I told you that a homeless veteran facing bankruptcy in just 18 hours discovered a real estate strategy so powerful that it made seasoned lawyers cry tears of disbelief? Carlos Martinez served 3 tours in Afghanistan, came home to financial ruin, and was about to lose everything until David Clark appeared with an impossible solution that defied every rule in the book. The rescue you're about to witness will restore your faith in second chances and prove that no financial crisis is too deep for strategic intervention. This is not just another success story. This is proof that miracles happen when desperation meets strategic real estate expertise. Stay right here because what unfolds next will change how you see impossible situations forever and transform your understanding of what's truly possible. Carlos Martinez stared at the foreclosure notice, taped to his front door, his hands trembling as he read the devastating words that would haunt him forever. 18 hours. That's all the time he had left before the sheriff would arrive to evict him and his 8-year-old daughter from the only home they'd ever known together. 3 tours in Afghanistan defending freedom, and now he couldn't even defend his own family from financial destruction. The bankruptcy papers lay scattered across his kitchen table like fragments of shattered dreams. $43,000 in medical debt from his PTSD treatment, $67,000 in credit card debt accumulated during his darkest months when nightmares kept him awake and bills kept piling up. His construction business had failed when panic attacks made it impossible to work on high scaffolding. Every door had slammed shut, every bank had said no, every lawyer had shaken their head in defeat. His daughter Sophia was at school, completely unaware that tonight might be their last night in the house where she'd taken her first steps, lost her first tooth, and still believed Daddy could fix anything. Carlos had already called his brother to pick her up after school. He couldn't bear to watch her innocent face when she realized they'd be sleeping in his truck tonight. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd survived roadside bombs, sniper fire, and 3 deployments in the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan, only to be defeated by medical bills and mortgage payments. The same hands that had once carried wounded soldiers to safety now shook as he tried to figure out how to explain homelessness to his daughter. The phone rang, interrupting his spiral into despair. Unknown number, probably another debt collector, demanding money he didn't have. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. The voice on the other end was calm, confident, and completely unexpected. Carlos, this is David Clark. I'm a real estate crisis specialist and I've been tracking your situation. I know this sounds impossible right now, but I have a strategy that can save your house and eliminate your debt completely. I'm 15 minutes away. Can you give me 18 minutes to show you something that will change everything? Carlos laughed bitterly. Another scam artist trying to profit from his misery. But David's voice carried something different. Not desperation for a sale, but genuine urgency to help. Against every instinct screaming that hope was dangerous, Carlos heard himself saying yes. Desperate? Stay right here because what David does next will restore your hope completely. When David Clark knocked on Carlos's door 17 minutes later, he found a broken man who had lost everything except the uniform hanging in his closet and the photo of his daughter on the mantel. Carlos opened the door with the hollow stare of someone who had already surrendered to defeat. The house smelled like coffee and desperation, with medical bills covering every surface like evidence of a life gone wrong. I've heard every scam, every false promise, every miracle cure, Carlos said, not even bothering to clear a space for David to sit. I served my country with honor, came home to nothing but nightmares and debt collectors. My wife left when she realized I couldn't provide anymore. My business failed when PTSD made me afraid of heights. I've tried everything legal and legitimate. Tomorrow the sheriff comes, and my daughter becomes homeless because her father is a complete failure. David looked around the modest home that told the story of a family that had once been happy. Sophia's drawing still decorated the refrigerator. Military commendations hung proudly on the wall next to photos of Carlos in uniform, looking strong and confident before war changed everything. This wasn't the home of a lazy man or a con artist. This was the home of a hero who had fallen through every crack in a system that promised to catch veterans. "Carlos, show me every piece of paper," David said quietly. "Every bill, every notice, every rejection letter. I need to see the complete picture before I can engineer your rescue." For the next hour, Carlos laid out his financial devastation like a coroner examining a corpse. The medical bills from his suicide attempt last year, the foreclosure notice, with tomorrow's deadline. The bankruptcy papers his lawyer said were his only option. The credit card statements that documented his descent into hopelessness. The rejection letters from every bank, every loan company, every organization that claimed to help veterans. The documentation painted a picture of systematic financial destruction. Credit cards maxed out during his wife's cancer treatments before she left him. Medical bills from his own PTSD therapy sessions that insurance refused to cover. Business loans that became impossible to service when panic attacks made construction work dangerous. Utility bills showing a pattern of late payments and disconnection notices. "The math is simple," Carlos said with the flat tone of a man reciting his own obituary. "I owe $237,000. My house is worth maybe $150,000 in this market, and I owe $189,000 on the mortgage. I make $800 a month from disability, and my minimum payments are $4,000. There is no solution." The lawyers confirmed it. The accountants confirmed it. Even the veterans organizations confirmed it. "I'm mathematically impossible to save." David studied every document with the intensity of a surgeon preparing for a life-saving operation. He made notes, drew diagrams, and occasionally asked questions that seemed completely unrelated to Carlos's crisis. "Who holds your mortgage? When did you buy the house? Do you have any equity positions? What's your credit score history before the crisis?" Carlos answered mechanically, certain this was just another well-meaning person who would eventually realize the situation was hopeless and leave him to face tomorrow alone. He'd been abandoned by the system he'd served, betrayed by the economy he'd helped defend, and now he was about to lose the home where his daughter still believed in happy endings. "The bankruptcy lawyer wants $3,000 just to file the papers," Carlos continued. "Money I don't have to declare myself a failure, and even then I lose the house anyway. Sophia will grow up knowing her father couldn't protect the only stability she's ever known. How do you come back from that? How do you explain to an 8-year-old that Daddy couldn't fight hard enough to keep her home?" Carlos's voice cracked as he picked up Sophia's latest school photo. "She still draws pictures of our family in this house. She still talks about the tree house I promised to build in the backyard. She still believes that military heroes don't lose their battles. Tomorrow, she learns that her hero is just another casualty of a war he couldn't win." David looked up from the papers with an expression Carlos couldn't read. Not pity, not false optimism, but something that looked almost like excitement. "Carlos, what if I told you that your biggest problem isn't your debt? What if I told you that your biggest problem is that nobody has shown you how to turn this crisis into the foundation of generational wealth?" Carlos felt anger rising for the first time in months. "Don't insult me with positive thinking garbage. I'm losing my home in 14 hours. My daughter is about to be homeless. This isn't a mindset problem. This is mathematical reality." David smiled, and for the first time since receiving the foreclosure notice, Carlos felt a flicker of something he'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Heartbroken. Subscribe right now because the life-saving method he reveals next has rescued thousands from financial ruin. David spread out a large whiteboard marker and began drawing diagrams on Carlos's kitchen table, as if he were planning a military operation. "Carlos, everything you've been told about your situation is based on traditional thinking that keeps people trapped in poverty. What I'm about to show you is based on Robert Kiyosaki's principles applied to crisis intervention. You're not broke. You're positioned for the most incredible financial turnaround you've ever seen." Carlos stared at the diagrams with the skepticism of a man who had been disappointed too many times. "I owe more than my house is worth. I have no income. I have no savings. Those aren't opinions, those are facts." "Facts, yes, but incomplete facts," David replied, drawing arrows and numbers with surgical precision. "Your house isn't your problem. Your house is your solution. But we're not going to save it the way everyone expects. We're going to multiply it. Kiyosaki teaches that poor people work for money, while rich people make money work for them. Tonight, we're going to transform you from someone who works for money into someone whose money works for him. David's first diagram showed Carlos's house with arrows pointing to 3 other properties. Traditional thinking says, sell the house, pay down, debt, declare bankruptcy, start over with nothing. Strategic thinking says, use the house as the foundation for acquiring 3 rental properties that will generate enough passive income to cover all your debt payments and provide surplus cash flow. This is what Kiyosaki calls leveraging your assets to acquire more assets. That's impossible, Carlos said, but he found himself leaning forward despite his skepticism. No bank will lend to someone facing foreclosure. I've been rejected by everyone. Banks, yes, but we're not going to traditional banks. We're going to use a strategy called subject to acquisitions, combined with seller financing that bypasses traditional lending completely. Listen carefully because this is going to sound impossible until you see it work. This is creative financing that most people never learn because they're stuck in traditional employment thinking. David's second diagram showed a complex web of property transfers and financing arrangements. There are thousands of properties in distressed situations just like yours. Owners who need to sell quickly but can't find traditional buyers. We're going to find 3 of these properties, acquire them with no money down using techniques that most people don't know exist, and structure the deals so they immediately generate positive cash flow. Each property becomes an asset that puts money in your pocket every month. Carlos studied the diagrams with the analytical mind that had once made him an excellent soldier. Even if that's possible, which I doubt, how does that help me tomorrow when the sheriff comes? Because we're not waiting until tomorrow. We're implementing this strategy tonight. David pulled out his phone and began scrolling through a list of properties. I've already identified 17 properties within 10 miles of here that meet our criteria: distressed sellers, below market prices, seller financing potential. We're going to make 3 offers tonight and have at least 1 accepted before morning. Speed is crucial in crisis intervention. David's third diagram showed the cash flow analysis that made Carlos's eyes widen. Property 1, 3-bedroom house, seller wants out. Will carry financing at 4%, immediate rental income $1,500 per month, mortgage payment $1,200, net cash flow $300. Property 2, duplex, owner retiring, will sell for 10% down, owner financed, rental income $2,000 per month, payment $1,600, net cash flow $400. Property 3, small apartment building, estate sale, massive discount, for quick close, rental income $3,000 per month, debt service $2,200, net cash flow $800. That's $1,500 per month in positive cash flow, Carlos calculated automatically. Exactly. More than enough to cover your current mortgage payment and start eliminating your other debts systematically. But that's just month 1. By month 6, we'll have optimized rents, improved properties, and increased your monthly passive income to over $2,500. By year 2, you'll own assets worth over $800,000, while your monthly passive income exceeds $4,000. Carlos felt his military training kicking in as he analyzed David's strategy for flaws. What about down payments? What about closing costs? What about property management? What about maintenance and repairs? David smiled at the precise questions. Down payments come from negotiating seller financing, where they carry the note, and we structure minimal cash requirements. Closing costs get rolled into the financing or covered by rental deposits collected in advance. Property management becomes your new business, generating additional income while you learn the industry that will make you wealthy. Maintenance and repairs are calculated into our cash flow projections and covered by the rental income surplus. This sounds too good to be true, Carlos said, but his tone had shifted from hopeless despair to cautious curiosity. It sounds too good to be true because you've been conditioned to believe that financial rescue requires traditional solutions. But traditional solutions created your crisis. Strategic solutions will create your comeback. David began packing up his materials. Carlos, I've used these exact techniques to rescue over 300 families from foreclosure. Not all of them were veterans, but all of them were told their situations were impossible. David pulled out a folder thick with testimonials and case studies. Here's Maria, single mother of 3, facing eviction, now owns 7 rental properties and earns $6,000 per month in passive income. Here's Robert, small business owner in bankruptcy, now controls a portfolio worth over $2 million. Here's Jennifer, teacher who lost everything in a divorce, now financially independent through strategic real estate acquisition. Here's Mark, another veteran like you, went from foreclosure to owning 12 rental units in 18 months. Carlos examined the documents with the thoroughness of someone who had learned not to trust easily. Bank statements, property deeds, cash flow analyses, photos of families standing in front of multiple properties they owned. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. These weren't lottery winners or trust fund recipients. These were ordinary people who had learned extraordinary strategies. The most important thing to understand, David continued, is that this isn't about getting lucky or finding some magical loophole. This is about applying proven principles that wealthy people use every day to acquire income-generating assets with minimal capital investment. The only difference is that we're applying these principles to crisis intervention instead of wealth building. Kiyosaki calls this making money work for you instead of working for money. David pointed to another diagram showing the multiplication effect. Once you own 3 properties generating positive cash flow, we use that income to qualify for more properties. Each property you acquire makes it easier to acquire the next one. This is called velocity of money. Your wealth compounds because each asset helps you acquire more assets. Carlos looked at the foreclosure notice still taped to his window, then back at David's diagrams showing a clear path from disaster to financial independence. For the first time in months, the crushing weight of hopelessness began to lift from his shoulders. "What do you need from me?" Carlos asked, and David recognized the shift from defeated victim to engaged participant. "I need you to trust the process, follow my instructions exactly, and prepare to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. This isn't passive income until we build it. This is strategic intervention that requires military precision and complete commitment. Are you ready to fight for your daughter's future instead of surrendering to circumstances?" Carlos stood up, straighter, and David saw the soldier returning to the broken man's eyes. "Sir, I'm ready to execute whatever strategy will save my family. Mind absolutely blown? Destroy that like button and stay locked in because the incredible transformation is about to unfold." At 11:30 that night, Carlos found himself sitting in the passenger seat of David's truck, driving through neighborhoods he'd never noticed before, looking at properties with eyes that suddenly saw opportunity instead of obstacles. The first house was a modest 3-bedroom that had been vacant for 6 months while the owner struggled with his own financial crisis in another state. "The seller is a veteran like you," David explained as they pulled into the driveway. "Lost his job, couldn't maintain the property from 2,000 miles away, getting killed by carrying costs. He needs someone to take over the payments and give him enough cash to relocate his family. This is a win-win situation disguised as an impossible deal." David's phone rang, and Carlos listened in amazement as David negotiated with calm confidence. "James, this is David Clark. I'm here at your property with Carlos Martinez, the veteran I mentioned. We're prepared to take over your payments immediately, give you $3,000 for moving expenses, and handle all the rehab and rental management. You'll be completely free of this burden by Friday." The conversation lasted 15 minutes, and Carlos watched David handle every objection with solutions that seemed to materialize from thin air. Insurance concerns, David had a solution: legal documentation. David's attorney would handle everything. Rental tenant screening? David's property management system was already in place. "Deal accepted," David announced as he hung up. "Carlos, you just acquired your first rental property with 0 money down. The rental income starts next month when we place the tenant I already have lined up." Carlos stared at the house that would soon generate $1,500 per month in passive income. 6 hours ago, he'd been facing homelessness. Now he was becoming a real estate investor. The transformation felt surreal, like waking up from a nightmare into someone else's dream. Property 2 came together even faster. A duplex owned by an elderly woman who needed to move into assisted living. but couldn't afford to sell at current market prices. David structured a deal where Carlos would buy the property over 15 years with monthly payments lower than the rental income, essentially getting paid to acquire an asset that would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars when he owned it free and clear. Mrs. Patterson gets the monthly income she needs for her care facility, David explained as they drove to Property 3. You get positive cash flow from day one and a property that will appreciate while you own it. She gets security, you get wealth building, the tenants get quality housing. Everyone wins when you structure deals strategically instead of traditionally. Property 3 was a small apartment building that became available through David's network of wholesalers and distressed property specialists. The numbers were so good that Carlos had to double-check the calculations 3 times before believing them. Net cash flow of $800 per month from a property they acquired, with seller financing and a small down payment covered by the security deposits from pre-qualified tenants. By 3 in the morning, Carlos owned 3 income-generating properties with a combined positive cash flow of $1,500 per month. More importantly, he had learned a system for finding and acquiring additional properties that would multiply his passive income indefinitely. The foreclosure notice on your house becomes irrelevant tomorrow, David explained as they drove back toward Carlos's neighborhood. Your new rental income exceeds your house payment, so we'll negotiate a loan modification based on your improved financial position. Instead of losing your home, you'll keep it while building a portfolio that ensures you'll never face financial crisis again. Carlos looked at the contracts in his lap, each one representing a financial asset that would generate income while he slept. The same mathematical precision that had once calculated impossibility now calculated prosperity. The same analytical skills that had identified problems now identified opportunities. David, how did you know this would work? How did you know I wouldn't fail like I've failed at everything else? David smiled as they pulled into Carlos's driveway. Because failure isn't about falling down, Carlos. Failure is about not getting back up. You served 3 tours in Afghanistan. You survived combat, PTSD, financial ruin, and the darkest depression of your life. You think acquiring rental properties is harder than what you've already overcome. For the first time in over a year, Carlos laughed with genuine joy instead of bitter irony. When you put it that way, real estate sounds like the easy part. The sun was rising as they finished the paperwork that would transform Carlos from a bankruptcy candidate into a real estate investor. Sophia would wake up in a few hours to discover that Daddy had indeed figured out how to fix everything, just like she'd always believed he could. But the most powerful, life-defining lesson that will determine whether you survive your own crisis is what I'm about to reveal. The lesson that saved Carlos isn't about real estate techniques or financial strategies. It's about understanding that your current crisis is not your final destination. Every impossible situation contains the seeds of an incredible comeback when you're willing to think strategically instead of traditionally. Carlos thought his greatest weakness was his debt, but it turned out his greatest strength was his willingness to trust a proven system and work with military precision to execute it. 6 months later, Carlos owns 7 rental properties generating over $4,000 per month in passive income. His PTSD symptoms haven't disappeared, but they no longer control his financial future. Sophia still lives in the house where she took her first steps, but now she also understands that Daddy's real job is helping other families build security through strategic real estate investment. Most importantly, Carlos has transformed from someone who needed rescue into someone who provides rescue for others facing similar crises. Next week, I'll share the incredible story of how David Clark rescued a single mother from eviction using a strategy so unconventional that it made hardened real estate professionals question everything they thought they knew about property acquisition. This rescue involved techniques that most investors have never heard of and created financial freedom in less than 90 days. If Carlos's transformation has inspired you to believe that your own financial crisis might be the beginning of your greatest comeback, then subscribe to this channel right now and hit that notification bell so you never miss a rescue story that could change your life. Like this video if you believe that no situation is too desperate for strategic intervention. Share this story with anyone you know who's facing foreclosure, bankruptcy or financial devastation, because they need to see proof that incredible rescues are possible when you apply strategic thinking to impossible situations. Your comments and engagement help this channel reach more people who desperately need hope and practical solutions. Tell me in the comments about your own financial challenges, and I'll personally review your situation to see if strategic real estate intervention could provide your rescue too. This channel exists to prove that no family should face financial destruction alone when strategic solutions are available to those willing to learn and implement them. Remember, your real estate empire starts with your next decision. Make it count.